Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Rabbit Hole. I'm here with um, Professor Canuck and myself, and we're about to start here. If you're over there on our page, that's going to be what are these? Oh, not that one. That one, not that one. God bless America. There you go. There you go. And then screen will be, this one will be, let me start with, not this one. Which one we're doing? I don't know which one. That's Chrome. I made that one. Well, anyway, we're trying to get there. Been working on a little technical issues. I'm grilling pork chops right now. That's all John After he says. All righty. That's wonderful. Yeah. And let me see. I'll put it in the thing here. There we go. Try this one. There we go. And wait, which one is it? God, there's so many things now. It's getting complicated. This is a little fun. There we go. I love that. Oh, that's just a little fun to do there. Good evening, everybody. Welcome, Canuck, to this night's rabbit hole, and we'll continue doing our discussion, which we already started. And let's get right into it. So, share on screen, and there we go. And let me see. So for over on Twitch. Where's it, this one? I don't know which one I'm on now. Right there. There we go. All right. So, yeah, that's the one. There we go. That's nice and big for y'all. And let me share.
Yeah, I wish we could see the map bigger, but
yeah, I'll get that picture in just a minute. Hold on.
It's embedded in there, so it's hard to get.
I'll get it. I'll get it. I know I can do that. So, Puget Sound phones. There we go. All right. So there we go. All right. So Twitch can see the bigger picture, and those out there in viewing out in was it YouTube and Rumble and Facebook. You now can see. Last night we ran it, and all you heard was voiceover. So now you'll have it. You'll have to be patient with me, the flicking the screens and all. It's a good thing we only have 3 or 4 screens to work out tonight. But we're going to talk about Puget Sound faults and Seattle faults. This is the Washington, USA earthquake faults, and then we'll talk about volcanoes at another date. So probably Christmas Eve or something.
Yeah, it mentions the volcanoes at the end of this one. So it talks about how they connect to Rainier and Mount St. Helens, but these are basically all the faults that are at the top of Washington. So, and they all have them in order from like the top down. So that's what we're going to talk about first, and then go into more detail on the Seattle fault now, because it's the most popular one. Everybody's all excited about with all the new stuff.
All right. So I got it blown up for everybody.
Yeah, that's better there.
Okay.
I probably should just explain the map first.
Yeah, let's explain the map.
Yeah. So they have a bunch. Well, it's all the faults on there. They have the Olympic Wallow liniment too. That's a little gray straight line thing.
This one right through the middle here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
going through the middle. Now, I'm not going to go into super detail on all these faults that are here, but we're going to mention the names of them so you know what they are. And I'm up at the top. See where that little V is? That's Victoria,
Yeah, right
BC.
up here. Okay, it's
Yeah, so
Victoria, BC at the top left-hand side.
yeah, and that fault that's going off it to the left there, that's the leak.
DMF.
No, there's one they don't have marked that's right by the V.
Okay.
They have it going to the left. That's actually the Leech River Fault on Vancouver Island.
Oh, okay, down here I see it. I see it.
Yeah, it goes all the way from Victoria all the way to Tofino on Vancouver
Tofino
Island.
in Canada? Oh, Vancouver Island. Okay.
Yeah. So they found that that one actually connects to both the Swift, which is the South Whidbey Island Fault, and the Devil's Mountain Fault, which goes across. So if you read the Canadian studies, they say that they all connect across to those and can make like sevens and tsunamis. But I'm not going to get into the BC ones right now, but I just want to mention that at the start, that they found that there's other ones that are coming across that connect to the ones that are in Washington from the Canadian side, because the faults don't care about borders, right? They never have.
Okay.
But anyway, so I'm just gonna start by reading the Puget Sound fault thing because it's given a little blurb on each one. It's not going into super detail, but it'll give everybody an indication, all the different ones that are up there, and there's a whole bunch of them that are all around like the northern part of Washington there that are all interconnected and running over each other and
okay,
all that.
So I blew up the screen, as you can tell.
Yeah.
All right.
So now I'm just going to read off the wiki and go down through it. I probably won't read everything, but cover like the main gist of it.
Okay.
And like from the stuff we watched earlier before Twitch crashed, all that stuff ties into what we're going to be talking about tonight, especially when we talk about Seattle fault.
All right.
So anyway, I'm going to start with reading the wiki here first. So Puget Sound faults. The Puget Sound faults under the heavily populated Puget Sound region, Puget Lowland, which ties back to our other episode previous to this one, where we talked about the Salish, Puget, and Portland,
all three basins.
Yeah, we're all connected in the lowland, so we're at the top of this big gigantic basin now, talking about the faults at the very top. So before we were talking about the ones in Oregon, so they'd be way farther south. So the Puget Lowland of Washington State form a regional complex of interrelated seismogenic earthquake-causing geological faults. These include from north to south. And it's going to list all the names, so I'm going to keep them off. Devil's Mountain Fault, Strawberry Point and Utsalady Point faults, Southern Whidbey Island Fault, Swift on the map, Rogers Belt, which is the Mount Vernon Fault and the Granite Falls Fault Zone, Cherry Creek Fault Zone, Rattlesnake Mountain Fault Zone. I think that's the one that has a big crack in all the hills that everybody was paranoid about here back.
The Rattlesnake one?
Okay. Yeah. Seattle Fault, which most people have heard about, which is the one that's right under Seattle. Tacoma Fault, which is the one that's right under Tacoma. Saddle Mountain Faults. Olympic Structure Suspected Fault, which that's the OWL, basically the Olympic Wallowa Liniment. Yeah. Doty Fault, and then the last is the St. Helens Zone and the Western Rainier Zone, which is the seismic zones that are around the volcanoes. Now the next section, general background, earthquake sources and hazard. The Puget Sound region, Puget Lowland, or Western Washington, contains the bulk of the population and economic assets of the state and carries 7% of the international trade of the United States, because of the port at Seattle.
Wow.
Yeah. All this is at risk of earthquakes from 3 sources. The first one, most everybody's already heard about. A great subduction earthquake, such as the magnitude 9, 1700 Cascadia earthquake, caused by slippage of the entire Cascadia subduction zone from approximately Cape Mendocino in Northern California to Vancouver Island in British Columbia. Intraslab Benioff zone earthquakes, such as the magnitude 6.7 2001 Nisqually earthquake, caused by slippage or fracturing on a small part of the subducting plate at a depth of around 50 kilometers, 31 miles. So that was the last big quake in the Seattle.
That was on the Benioff zone.
Yeah.
And where the hell is that? Is that
and they don't know which fault it was because it was 50 kilometers down. So they actually think it was in the subducting plate.
Okay, down below the crust, but where the subducting plate's going down because it's 31 miles deep. Okay.
Yeah. So if you look up that earthquake, which I've done before, and we're going to talk about it later, but it won't be in this episode.
Right.
But that's what they figured out from it. So they don't know what fault it was on because it would be a fault that would be in that subducting plate.
Right. The Wadati Benioff zone is a planar zone of seismically corresponding with the downgoing slab in a subduction zone. Differential motion along the zone produces numerous earthquakes, foci of which may be as deep as about 420 miles. The term was named for 2 seismologists. It's a Wadi and Benioff zone. It happens to be not so much a fault, but a type of area where earthquakes happen.
Yeah. Which is why it's important that, you look at the depths of the earthquakes in relation to the depth of the crust that's in that area. Because if it's below the depth of the crust in that area, then it's most likely in the subducting plate that's going underneath it. So that's why knowing the depths of the quake is very important, and how thick your crust is in whatever area you're looking at. And then the last one here, relatively shallow crustal earthquakes, generally less than 25 kilometers, 16 miles deep, caused by stresses and faulting in the near surface crustal structures. The energy released depends on the length of the fault. The faults here are believed capable of generating earthquakes as great as magnitude 6 or 7. So if you look at all the current studies that are on most of these faults now, they say they can make high 6s or 7s. So all these faults that we're going to be touching on tonight,
reviewing,
that's what they can do.
Okay.
Yeah. So while the great subduction events release much energy around magnitude 9, that energy is spread out over a large area and largely centered near the coast. The energy of the somewhat smaller Benioff earthquakes is likewise diluted over a relatively large area. The largest intracrustal earthquakes have about the same total energy, which is about 1/100th of a subduction event. But since they are closer to the surface, they will cause more powerful shaking and therefore more damage.
Yeah. Picture on screen is where the Benioff zone is. You can see it's below the continental lithosphere, and the oceanic lithosphere is below that, all right, below the trench. So that's just to give you a piece.
Yeah. So then it gives an example. One study of seismic vulnerability of bridges in the Seattle-Tacoma area estimated that a magnitude 7 earthquake on the Seattle or Tacoma faults would cause nearly as much damage as a magnitude 9 subduction earthquake off the coast. Because the Seattle and Tacoma Faults run directly under the biggest concentration of population and development in the region, more damage would be expected. But all the faults reviewed here may be capable of causing severe damage locally and disrupting the regional transportation infrastructure, including highways, railways, and pipelines. Links with more information on the various hazards can be found in the Seattle Fall article, which we'll be looking at more after we go through this big one. Yeah. The Puget Sound region is not just potentially seismic, it is actively seismic. Mapping from the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network shows that the bulk of the earthquakes in western Washington are concentrated in 4 places in 2 narrow zones under Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier along the DDMFC and under Puget Sound between Olympia and approximately the southern Whidbey Island Fault. The southern limit nearly matches the southern limit of the glaciation. Possibly the seismicity reflects rebound of the upper crust after being stressed by the weight of the glacial ice.
Right. That rebound is when the ice melts and the land, because of the weight of the ice, was pushed down, is now rising.
Yeah.
That's what rebound is. That's what's happening in Canada right now with the ice sheet melting.
Yeah. Thick glacial and other deposits, heavy vegetation, urban development, and a topography of sharp relief and rapid erosion obscures the surface expression of faults in the region and has hindered their discovery. The first definite indications of most of these faults came from gravitational mapping in 1965. So that was a while ago. And their likely existence noted on mapping in 1980 and 1985. As of 1985, only the Saddle Mountain faults had been shown to have Holocene activity since the last ice age about 12,000 years ago. Not until 1992 was the first of the lowland faults, the Seattle Fault, confirmed to be an actual fault with Holocene activity, and the barest minimum of its history is established. Discovery of faults has been greatly facilitated with the development of LIDAR, a technique that can generally penetrate forest canopy and vegetation to image the actual ground surface with an unprecedented accuracy of approximately 1 foot or 30 centimeters. An informal consortium of regional agencies has coordinated LIDAR mapping of much of the central Puget lowland, which has led to discovery of numerous fault scarps, which are then investigated by trenching polyseismology. Marine seismic reflection surveys on Puget Sound, where it cuts across the various faults, have provided cross-sectional views of the structure of some of these faults. And an intense wide area combined onshore-offshore study in 1998, seismic hazard investigation in Puget Sound, or SHIPS, resulted in a 3-dimensional model of much of the subsurface geometry. Aeromagnetic surveys, which we saw in the thing with Nick right before, seismic tomography, and other studies have also contributed to locating and understanding these faults. Now, the geological setting. The ultimate driver of the stresses that cause earthquakes are the motions of the tectonic plates. Material from the Earth's mantle rises at spreading centers and moves out as plates of oceanic crust, which eventually are subducted under the more buoyant plates of continental crust. Western Washington lies over the Cascadia subduction zone, where the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting towards the east. This is being obliquely overridden by the North American plate coming out of the northeast, which has formed a bend in the subducting plate and in the forearc basin above it. This bend has distorted the subducting slab into an arch that has lifted the Olympic Mountains and prevented them from subducting. for the past 50 million years or so, since the early Eocene epoch, these have been thrust by subduction up against the North Cascades, which sit on the North American plate. This forms a pocket or trough where one local geologist calls the big hole between the mountains. Between the Cascades on the east and the Olympic Mountains and Willapa Hills on the west. The pocket is catching a stream of terrains, crustal blocks about 20 to 30 kilometers thick, which is what Nick talked about with Aaron.
Yeah, exactly what we're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, which the Pacific Plate is pushing up the western edge of North America, and in the process imparting a bit of clockwise rotation in southwestern Washington and most of Oregon. The result has been characterized as a train wreck. Yeah, because referred to that in previous episodes that we watched.
Oh, yeah.
The other people. These trains were covered by the basalts of the Crescent Formation, part of Silesia. Folding and faulting has exposed these basalts in some places. The intervening basins have been filled by various sedimentary formations, some of which have been subsequently uplifted. Glacially deposited and shaped fill covers most of the lower elevations of Puget Sound. This is the Puget lowland. The principal effects of the complex interplay of forces on the near surface crust underlying the Puget lowland are: the basement rock of the Crescent Formation is being forced up on the southern, eastern, and northern flanks of the Olympic Mountains and at various folds or wrinkles. Some upper crustal formations, such as the western and eastern melange belts, have been pushed onto the older pre-tertiary basement of the North Cascades. There is a general north or northeast directed compression within the lowland, causing folds which eventually break to become dip slip, thrust, or reverse faults. So going
Okay,
back
we
into
talked about
all
all of those: dip, slips, thrust, and reverse faults. Refer to those rabbit holes in early September, and you'll get a definition of those.
Yeah.
Specifically dealing with Los Angeles and the surrounding fault systems around there.
Yeah. Some strike slip horizontal movement is as expected along the peripheral faults, such as the Southern Whidbey Island fault and the Saddle Mountain faults. Farther complicating this is a feature of unknown structure and origin, the Olympic Wallowa liniment, so the owl. This is a seemingly accidental alignment of topographic features that runs roughly east-southeast from the north side of the Olympic Peninsula to the Wallowa Mountains in northeastern Oregon. It aligns with the West Coast Fault and the Queen Charlotte Fault system of strike-slip fault zones, similar to the San Andreas Fault in California on the west side of Vancouver Island, but does not itself show any significant or through-going strike-slip movement. It is of interest here because the various strands of the Seattle Fault change orientation where they appeared across the owl, and various other features, such as the Rosedale monocline in Olympia structure, and a great many local topographical features have parallel alignments. It may also be the original location of the Darrington Devil's Mountain Fault, which that's the one up there at the very top that connects across to Victoria, BC. It may also be the original
DMF.
Yeah, because there's actually two there. There's Devil's Mountain and there's the Darrington one. So they put them together. Well, if you were talking to the ones on the Canadian side now, they'd say it's Leech River,
Yeah,
Devil's Mountain,
change
Darrington are all one.
Make it difficult, you Canucks.
Yeah. So the owl appears to be a deep-seated structure over which the shallower crust of the Puget lowland is being pushed, but this remains speculative. Well, everything's speculative until proven later.
All right, I'll read the next page here. The next part here, already putting it on screen for you. And let me zoom it in so you can see it clear. There you go, big guy. All right, this is the area we're going to talk about now, or what the wiki has on it. Yeah, we're reading a lot of the wikis because the wikis are more concise and it fits our needs for our discussion. It kind of lays a foundation for us to kind of give you a background, and then the discussion emanates out of that. The uplift and basin pattern. Most of the faults in the actual zones of complex faulting at the boundaries between sedimentary basins, the synclines, and the crustal uplift anticlines. So the synclines bending up in like an upside down U, and the crustal uplifts anticlines are the lower parts. Okay, this is a general pattern of most of these faults: partition, and series of basin and uplifts, such as are about 20 kilometers wide. From the north of these are at the map you can see, right? Devil's Mountain Fault Zone, Strawberry Point, Alt Saldy Point faults. That's a U Everett Basin. So that's the Devil one's way at the top. Okay. The Southern Whidbey and Island Fault, WSIF, which is a SWIFT, which you can see it kind of goes from the top left and dives down toward Kingston Arch. Okay, Kingston Arch is a anticline, right? The Southern Whidbey is a syncline. That means it's upside down, right? It's from upward, right? And Seattle Fault, which is lines E and F, which is E and F right in the middle with that little blue area where it says Seattle right here. Yeah, you guys can see that. Good. Right there. And those are, again, synclines. The Tacoma Fault, although, is an anticline. And that's line C, which is right down here. Here's the Tacoma Fault, right? So that's let me see, make sure. Yeah, it's a Seattle uplift. So it's a syncline. And the Olympia Fault, a Black Hills uplift, and that's A down here. Down here. There you go. That's for those over on the other channels. That sucker is a syncline as well. And then the Doty Fault, Scammon Creek Fault, the Chalice Basin, is an anticline, right? And that would be the Chalice Basin would be down here. So, in essence, let me see. I can draw it on the right here, and I can hide this from stream. There we go. And let me see. Do I do it this one or do it? Yeah. So on the map, we have these like this, right?
Yep.
So it said that at the Devil's Mountain Fault, it's an anticline. That's Devils. And then the next one would be the Southern Whidbey. That's the right here, this fault. The other one's in the other fault is in the valley, right down here. See, there's the other faults down here. So the one at the top is the syncline, and the one at the bottom is the anticline. So that's what these mean. So I hope that kind of helps, because when you're looking at topography, it's like, well, which one are we looking at on a real map? You can be able to tell in the valleys are the anticlines, in the tops are the synclines. Okay.
Yeah, it's really basin and range.
Yeah.
Same idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uplifts are your range, and then your down ones, which are the basin or the valley. That's really what it is. And all these are, of course, inside the gigantic Puget lowland. Puget lowland. So it's just a whole bunch of downs and ups inside the whole thing.
Right.
And the faults are along the edges of it. That's really all it is, to simplify.
So the Hood Canal Fault and its possible extensions and the Seattle Mountain Faults to the west are believed to form the western boundary to all of this. On the east, the Doubles Mountain Fault connects with the south striking Darrington Fault, not shown on this map, which runs to the Owl, the Olympic Walla Walla liniment. And the southern Whidbey Island Fault extends via the Rattlesnake Mountain Fault, dashed line, ding, 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 right? Down here you can see that. Good. Make sure that Twitch can see that. Yeah, we can. Not shown. Okay. Okay. Extends the Rattlesnake Mountain Fault, dash line to the Owl. So it like crosses it, right? Here's the Olympic Mountain uplift. The Walla Walla is right through there. And it crashes into each other in the east, basically. Example, Olympic Fault is aligned with the appears to be the northernmost member of the set of faults between Olympia and Challis that may extend to the Columbia River. And there has been suggestion that the Tacoma Fault may connect with the White River, not just river fault on the east side of the Cascades. They just don't know, but that's the idea. That's what's going on. The uplift basin patterns is continued to the west and southwest by Grays Harbor Basin, Willapa Hills uplift, and the Astoria Basin, which is way down in Oregon. But it's not known if these boundaries bounded by faults in the same manner as the Puget Sound. We need to go into a lot of this. There's another map here, which I don't have. It's pretty good. I should probably go get it. And I'll save it. And there we go. Images. And I'll grab it. Just once. There we go. And I'll share it for you. Screen. And, Check. It's easier to see these images when we blow them up. Hey, what's going on? Didn't I already zoom out? Oh, it's a GIF. Oh my crap! I wanted to zoom in on it for you. Oh, you guys are on a different level. Hold on. Check this one. And, there you go. Yeah, that's it. Right? Yeah. All right, good. Let me get the people off of that one. All right, bear with me. I closed the wrong one. It's just getting these pictures together for you. You can talk about the Doubles Mountain Fault. Go ahead. I'll get the image up for you.
Yeah, so in this big long list, I'm going to talk about like the most ones that they're concerned about the most. So Devil Mountain's Fault is one of them. So I'll start with that one, but we're going to do like Swift and Seattle Fault and Tacoma Fault, basically.
All right,
I'm not going to do all the other ones right now, or we'd be here.
I just hit the main ones. That's kind of what we do anyway.
Yeah. The Devil's Mountain Fault, DMF, runs about 125 kilometers, 75 miles, from the town of Darrington in the Cascade foothills due west to the northern tip of Whidbey Island and on towards Victoria, British Columbia, where the DMF is believed to join the Leech River Fault system at the southern end of Vancouver Island. At Darrington, it is seen to connect with the Darrington Fault, which runs nearly south 110 kilometers, to converge with the Straight Creek Fault.
Straight Creek Fault? Ooh.
Yeah.
All right, so it's a splay off the Straight Creek then. Straight Creek's on between the green and the pink. The blue is and the purple, and between that is the Devil's Mountain Fault.
Which is why I only want to talk about certain ones, because we've heard.
Right, because they converge right down here, the Yakima, and right along the Walla Walla lineament. These are very unique because the Entiat comes off of that, and what's in between the Entiat and the Straight Creek, there has been a lot of movement between the two over the years, and stuff is up there and should be down there, and you roll it all back, you get to see something really interesting. That was with some of the classes that we took with Nick, and really far out stuff, and understanding how these faults work and how they're connected, I think helps us say, okay, hey, look, this fault is moving. And when we can trace these faults and say, okay, these are creaking along here, hey, we ought to pay attention to this fault, because this fault can do a hell of a lot of damage because it's right underneath this 30-story building. And they make it right, built it right on top. So it's like, hey, this is an area, be careful. I don't know exactly in Seattle where the needle is, but it's not on one of these faults, but it's out there in Seattle. So
close enough.
Yeah, it's close enough. I would want to be up in that thing ever, but I find it really interesting with this map, seeing the Devil's Mountain Fault and the Straight Creek merging supposedly down, because a lot of this they can't see because it's farther down there, but it's suggested that they do meet down there underneath. And the Entiat, that's another major fault that lines up with the Straight Creek. And so much has been made of the Straight Creek Fault and the Entiat Fault that I think we do ourselves a disfavor by not talking about where they're at and where they're located and what kind of dangers they can be.
Like Nick usually mentions the fault if it's in whatever area he's talking about.
Right.
But then he's not talking about all the other ones that are right next to it that connect to it, right?
We got Mount Daniel down here, Mount Stewart down here. We talk a lot about that. We talk about Glacier Peak. And it's interesting that there is this kind of line of demarcation between San Juan Islands, which is part of Silesia, or a portion of it is, and part of Vancouver Island right up in here, part of Silesia, and then Olympic, that is Silesia, and that there's a basin in between the Olympics and the Cascade volcanoes right through here. Straight Creek goes right through them, right? Mount Rainier is on this side, so Straight Creek is on the eastern side of Mount Rainier, but it's on the western side of Glacier Peak. So it divides it. And then we talk about, we've learned through Nick's discussions with his geologist and not seismologist, but physics people, that this area here was all just kind of a baseline. And then when Silesia came up, it uplifted. And there is a place in between these two. And it's seen on this image here that there's a difference between what's going on and what's visible, what's not. So what's under the ground, and they can see now where Silesia stopped and where the Cascades ranges began, and these faults are related to that whole rigmarole. And there's talk that Straight Creek predates the Cascades, as well as I think the Devil's Mountain Fault is also. I could be misunderstood that, but the Devil's Creek was created, or it predates the crash of Silesia, 53 million years ago, onto
Yeah,
Oregon.
that's what they're saying, that it was there before, but it was down lower.
Right, it's at a lower elevate or position, and it's been pushed all the way up there.
Yeah.
Due to the igneous province that was off the coast, kind of like a little bit island chain that was a little bit above water, a little bit underwater. And when North America merged or moved west, it ran into it, and it kind of took some of that. And there was a subduction zone that existed, and it kind of clogged, so to speak, the subduction zone, because it didn't want to go all the way down, because it was lighter material, rhyolite, or actually it was basalt. Basalt is really light, and it kind of just like got stuck on the land, and it didn't want to go down the trench. And because of that, and it kept pushing north, and it bent this Devil's Mountain Fault. I think that's how that's been characterized. So merging with what we're talking about, with what Nick's talking about, this is kind of it's been really interesting here. Go continue there, Kanan.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip over a bunch of this other part in here because it's talking about all the stuff. It's talking about the Manistash Ridge and all that stuff, the same stuff that Nick's talked about before, and the Chucking Up Formation and all that stuff. So it's basically talking about how all that stuff happened, how it all got there, and when it was, and when the fault was active, like the Straight Creek Fault. It has 50 to 48. It's all stuff we've already heard about before, so I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to go down here to the bottom of it, because it says the Devil's Mountain Fault is seismically active, and there's evidence of Holocene offsets. If the entire 125-kilometer length ruptured in a single event, the resulting earthquake could be as large as magnitude 7.5.
Wow.
However, there are indications that the fault is segmented, which might limit rupturing an earthquake magnitude, which we've talked about that before.
Right.
Now I'm going to
Darrington is Darrington would be partial right up here, and Devil's Mountain Fault. They probably would call it some other name on a splay, or a continuous, which we've run into several times, where we trace down in Los Angeles. We trace like 6 or 8 different named faults. We call them segments. Each of those segments, if they all ripped, it's like 7 plus. But if each individual rip, they can be anywhere from 4 to 6. And if they just ripped that one little part, or if that one little part just broke, that doesn't mean that it won't kick off the other stuff. There's that probability as well. But when you see segmented faults, series of segment, or a series of segmented faults, then it's not like the whole thing can rip. And so there's a lot of interest, things we can discuss and all that.
Yeah. So now I'm not going to go into detail here on the Strawberry Point and Lady Point faults. I'm just going to say what they've found out about it, which that
Go ahead.
is at the end. Yeah. Trenching on the UPF and the scarp that was identified by LiDAR shows at least 1 and probably 2 Holocene earthquakes of magnitude 6.7 or more. The most recent one between AD 1550 to 1850 and possibly triggered by the 1700 Cascadia earthquake. These earthquakes probably caused tsunamis, and several nearby locations have evidence of tsunamis not correlated with other known quakes. So any of these faults that go into the water basically could cause a tsunami if it was big enough. So this is what they're worried about now, because this is all like pretty new stuff in the last 5 years. Because everybody focuses on Cascade.
Right.
All these can cause all sorts of issues too.
Right. They miss all that other stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Silesia was way earlier. Silesia was 53 when it crunched, and so just
well, they say that some of these faults are fairly recent, but they also say they're ones that predate Silesia smashing in. So,
right.
I think they're going to find once they get even better at it that all of these are pre-existing. That's what I think. Because if they go all the way through to the bottom of the crust, well, there's been crust there even when it was all covered with water. It was just on the ocean floor. But anyway, that's an aside. So the next one we're going to talk about is the Southern Whidbey Island Fault, because it's a pretty good one too. The Southern Whidbey Island Fault, SWIF, is a significant terrain boundary manifested as an approximately
Location, Carlsberg Ridge, class, moderate, magnitude, 5.0, depth, 10 kilometers,
Ridge is up
ago.
Manifested
10 kilometers. That's pretty shallow.
Yeah. An approximately 4-mile wide zone of complex transpressional faulting with at least 3 strands. So Southern Whidbey has 3 strands. Marine seismic reflection surveys show it striking northwest across the eastern end of the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Just south of Victoria, British Columbia, it intersects the west striking Devil's Mountain Fault, which we just talked about, and either merges with it or crosses and possibly truncates it to connect with the Leech River Fault, which I mentioned before. The Leech River Fault has been identified as the northern edge of the Crescent Formation. Part of the Silesia
Crescent Formation is what? Yeah, Silesia terrain.
That underlies much of Washington and Oregon. Seismic tomography studies show that this portion of the SWIF marks a strong contrast of seismic velocities, such as expected of Crescent Formation basalts, in contact with the metamorphic basement rocks of the Cascades geological province to the east. To the southeast, the SWIF passes through Admiralty Inlet past Port Townsend and across the southern part of Whidbey Island, crossing to the mainland between Mukilteo and Edmonds. That's the name. The section of the SWIF forms the southwestern side of the Everett Basin, which is notably seismic in that essentially no shallow, less than 12 kilometers deep earthquakes have occurred there, or on the section of the SWIF adjoining it in the first 38 years of instrumental recording. It is also notable that most seismicity in the northern Puget Sound occurs along and southwest of the southern Whidbey Island Fault at typical depths of 15 to 27 kilometers within the lower part of the Crescent Formation. No, I'm not going to get into all this other stuff here.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of complicated.
I think what we did is say that we're talking about a whole bunch of the Coast Range Boundary Fault, CRBF, right? Is hypothesized expected to be the basis of tectonic considerations, which may correlate in part or one or more currently known faults. It may be involved as yet an undiscovered fault. Simply put, the basement rock on the west side of the Puget Sound, that's on the left side, right? Yeah. Does not match the basement rock on the east side. Now, Professor Nick, we've talked about this, that there's Silesia, then there's the sedimentary stuff that gets put in the middle, and then there's other, and then there's the North America, right? And then there's the Cascade Range and all their crud, right? So in between and that's this section, section that's underwater and above water, in the basement rocks. That's where Professor Nick's been for the last three episodes, and trying to get you to understand how it's all working and where the pressure of Silesia is, where the pressure of the Cascades volcanics are, and then these other volcanics, which we learned about today and yesterday, right? That are like in between that, and due to when the plate went underneath and it broke off because Silesia kind of clogged, so to speak, the downward trend. It got stuck, and the other part still being pulled down, and it was pulled apart, and it just kind of snapped off and went boop, and continued down. So that kind of stuff, and looking at this area here, we're able now, once we really grasp this stuff, we can go and look about what's happening around the world and understand, hey, that's just like the Puget Sound. Hey, that's a igneous province up there. Wow. That's what's going on in this fault. So when you look at, and you just kind of look at different areas, a lot of areas in the continents around the world, you'll see these kind of things. I was going to say the maritime continent, which is Indonesia and all the islands that get all crunched together. It's like, how do you make heads or tails of that? Well, you can if you start to understand the depths of subducting plates, and when one island runs into it, and two islands smash into each other. It's not like they smash very fast. Okay, it's over 10 million years. They smash into each other, and then the scraping off of underwater volcanoes that because they're basaltic, that gets put on the land above, right? It doesn't get shoved down. It gets scraped off and put on shore, much like Silesia. Silesia put on shore, and it clogged the trench, and the trench ended up having to move, right? It moved inland or moved out. It moved away, moved on the other side of Silesia, shut off for a little time, and then boom, came back up because of the way things were working. And it's interesting, these type of things, and correlating that with Nick's courses, I think, go hand in hand with what we're trying to do as well. We started again in northern Mexico, go all the way up here to Washington next couple of weeks. I think in the new year we'll be into BC, and then up the Fair Creek Fault all the way up into Alaska, and our goal will be that. But I don't know if we're going to touch the Cascade volcanoes. Do you feel like we should touch those, or because so much is already done on them?
It would have to be we'd have to do like a separate episode just on that.
Yeah.
Cascadia.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll do the next time around. We'll touch just briefly on, the whole Cascades and say, hey, this is where they are. These are the kind of volcanoes they are. And we already did that in Oregon, or didn't we? Did we touch a little bit on that in Oregon?
Yeah, we talked about some of the ones in Oregon. We never went into, like, we could have done Mount Hood and talked about all the faults they've discovered there coming off it, but we never did it.
Right. And
like almost, if we were doing it in super detail, you'd have to do like each
volcano. I think for myself, I think it's like too much detail for people. Like what we're doing right now is a lot of detail because we're using this Wikipedia to really lay a foundation with or adding to the foundation that Nick has put. And if those people who haven't listened to Nick Zentner, go check him out, nickzentner.com. He's also on YouTube. Wonderful teacher, and I highly recommend his A to Z videos, and you'll get information not just from him, but from geologists in the field today, and the studies today, and the articles that are already written, which there's no end to articles, my God. But in understanding a lot of these things, and I'm trying to not say too much great stuff, but trying to low key it a little bit because it is a little bit intense, man. But
you'll find all this stuff ties in together once you
right.
start looking in depth into it. It starts making more sense because you hear them talking about different stuff depending on who it is, that what area Nick's talking about or who he's talking to. And then you'll hear all these names and figure out what they actually mean. At some point, the more that you look into it. So it may sound all confusing at first, which is probably all this fault stuff sounds confusing too, but it's just because we've been looking at it for a while. So it's
right. I think we'll transition into the Seattle fault, so you can do that.
There's too many for us to go
over. We just want to go into detail with one. Because Seattle or the Seattle area, you can see all the different faults, and the main thing is on the left side is where an island arc or an island came in, smashed against North America. It has its own arc that's been subducted and not subducted, and then there's a transition valley, so to speak, where it was a valley before, and sediment had run off the mountains and into that area, and then the subduction zone on the other side of Silesia was created, and which created the Cascades relatively recent. So we're talking between 50 and 1735 million years ago when the Cascades all started. But there is volcanics that are precursors to the Cascades. They're in the middle, but they're on the eastern side of that bay, and then the Cascades are beyond that. So, I mean, the Igneous Province or Silesia was a volcanic stuff too. It just how rocks are made, how the land was made. So learning where these things are, and differentiating them is kind of gives you a little more understanding of the greater Seattle area. I think that's what we're after. And I think we'll end up spending time on that. With the Qualawa and another day.
Yeah. One of the lineaments that I talk about is the Olympic Qualawa lineament, which I think keeps going, but another episode. So we're going to jump to the Seattle fault, jump over all these other ones. Even though in this thing it says when they think all the last time they quaked, most of them, because they've done multiple studies on each one now. But we're going to focus on the Seattle one right now because it's one of the most dangerous ones and what a lot of people are focusing their studies on recently. So we're going to read about that first. The Seattle Fault is a zone of complex thrust and reverse faults, up to 7 kilometers wide and over 70 kilometers long, that delineates the north edge of the Seattle uplift. It stands out in regard of its east-west orientation, depth to bedrock, and hazard to an urban population center. The Seattle Fault was first identified in 1965 because there was a big quake in that area in 65. But I'll talk about that more another day. But not documented as an active fault until 1992, with a set of 5 articles establishing that about 1,100 years ago, AD 900 to 930, an earthquake of magnitude 7 plus uplifted Restoration Point and Alki Point, dropped West Point, caused rock slides in the Olympics, landslides into Lake Washington, and a tsunami on Puget Sound. Now they've now found out, if you look up the latest studies, that it actually happened in the year 923.
923. Okay. Well, they had
Yeah.
it 900 and 930, so that's pretty close.
And they found out Saddle Mountain Fault Zone had a big quake the year after in 924. So that's in all the latest stuff if you go to look it up. So the wiki hasn't even been updated with the newest stuff.
That's okay.
Yeah, because rocks. Oh yeah, I said that already. It
Right.
extends as far east and probably terminates at the Rattlesnake Mountain Fault Zone. RMFC, the southern extension of the Swift, because we never talked about Rattlesnake Mountain, but it's another one
Right.
that connects to Swift. Because they keep finding all these faults are all connected when they didn't think they were before. This seems geological reasonable as both the Swift and RMFC appear to be the contact between tertiary crescent formation basement of Puget Sound on the west and the older Mesozoic pre-tertiary melange belt basement rocks under the Cascades on the east. So if you watched all Nick's stuff lately, this is what they're talking about. Structure. The Seattle Fault is the most studied of the regional faults, which has led to several models of its structure, which may also be relevant to other faults. In the wedge model of Pratt and a bunch of other people, 1997, a slab of rock, mainly basalts of the Crescent Formation, about 20 kilometers thick, is being pushed up a master ramp of deeper material. This forms the Seattle uplift. So it's a pizza box thing that Nick talked about way before.
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
Yeah, the Seattle Fault Zone is where the forward edge of the slab coming to the top of the ramp breaks and slips into the Seattle Basin. In this model, the Tacoma Fault Zone is primarily the result of local adjustments as the slab bends upward at the bottom of the ramp. Then it talks about the seismic hazard investigations in Puget Sound, which I'm not going to talk about, but it's.
Mm-hmm. So you can see that. Hold on, let me see if I can get you that diagram.
Yeah. But the results of all these studies that they've done, while these models vary in some details, both indicate that Seattle Fault itself is capable of a magnitude 7.5 earthquake. But if the Seattle Fault should break in conjunction with other faults, which are all the ones we've discussed above, considerably more energy would be released on the order of a magnitude 8. So see, that's the first time I've heard that. But that must be pretty new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So now they say it could make an 8 if it breaks in conjunction with a bunch of these other faults that are all running
That's
through
pretty
it.
serious, right?
Yeah, so that wouldn't be good.
No.
Yeah.
And then I have it here for you. Share on stream. There you go. There's Rodale, Menakine. You can see the land is up at the top. You see all the little gray dots of the earthquakes. You can see that it's bent way down, right?
Yeah.
And you can see it's south. So on the left side going north. It's on the right side. So that's the orientation. The Seattle uplift is due to these the Rosedale monocline, Seattle Basin, right? The uplifting here, right? And here's the question mark in there in the middle, and there's the TP. So I hope that helps with understanding where the directions he was saying.
Yeah. So now what we're going to do, we're going to jump to the actual Seattle Fault wiki.
Right,
article.
I got you, bud. Go to the other article. Yeah. Title stream. Hey, how'd your book too? Let me,
Now, I'm not going to read everything in here because it repeats stuff that I just
sure, which we've already talked about. Yeah.
But I'm going to read the notable earthquake section because it has a bunch of the new data in it. first suspected from mapping of gravitational anomalies in 1965, an uplifted marine terrace at Restoration Point. The Seattle Fault's existence and likely hazard were definitively established by a set of 5 reports published in Science in 1992. These reports looked at the timing of abrupt uplift and subsidence around Restoration Point and Alki Point, and tsunami deposits on Puget Sound, turbidity in lake paleosediments. So they're taking the turbidite from lakes now, so not just like offshore Cascadia.
They're looking for the turbidites, which are creatures, right? And they're looking for them inland. How far did he go in on the tsunami?
Yeah, rock avalanches and multiple landslides around Lake Washington, and determined that all these happened about 1,100 years ago, between 923 and 924. So see, that's the new stuff in this article. And most likely due to an earthquake of magnitude 7 or greater on the Seattle Fault. Although the 923-924 CE earthquake was over 1,000 years ago, local traditional stories have preserved the association of a powerful supernatural spirit, Ayahos, or however they say it, noted for shaking rushes of water and landsliding, with 5 locales along the trace of the Seattle Fault, including a spirit boulder called Sayahus near the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock in West Seattle. So, like, they have all this crazy information that they're trying to correlate together. So,
right. Well, the Indians or the Native Americans at the time, and let's see that again. Pretty good place, but we already talked about the geology of this. The Seattle Fault, a structure boundary where 50, 60 million years are old, early tertiary basalt of the Crescent Formation on the south has been uplifted, a saddle uplift. We learned that in one of Nick's classes, if you put your left hand in front of your right hand out in front of you, and your left hand you turned inward and your right hand you turned outward, that's how the uplift of this area is. It's twisted, and it declines in the north, and in the south it's kind of an upwards and kind of outwards toward the sea. So it's a little bit of a twist. And catching a 7 or a 7.5 out here, that's pretty crazy. And knowing that 1,100 years ago that happened. And I don't know the frequency of these. 923.
I do now because I read the newest studies. So they figured out now that in the last 3,000 years, it's gone off 3, possibly 4 times. So they say the recurrence rate, based upon what they know right now, is every 1,000 years.
Oh, really?
So actually, it's overdue, according to the newest stuff.
So they've got records going back 4,000 years, is what you're saying?
3,000.
So 3,000.
They know for sure it went off 3 times, possibly 4.
Okay.
And
the last time was 923, or was it at a later date that they don't have any records?
Well,
because 1,000 years off that would be 1900. Yeah. So
yeah.
But
there was another large quake that they figured out was close at the same, like within a year of the 923 one, which they found was on Saddle Mountain fault zone from studying that one. So it actually had 2 large quakes close together within a year of each other, which if you read about the Saddle Mountain fault zone latest things, it explains all that. So it's crazy stuff.
Yes, sir. Just looking at today's earthquakes. I was going to do a search for the Seattle area seeing what they thought since the 1700s. And because at 1700,
Yeah, there's been like sixes
yeah, that's what I'm catching. A lot of sixes, if I remember right.
in that area of the Puget.
I put everything above 6. Yeah, the strongest 7.5 in Vancouver area. I'll show you this. So right here is the strongest at 7.5 in 1946 up here. Now, Seattle and all that stuff we're talking about is right in here. And most of those faults kind of go northwest to southeast. And some of them even go east-west. Am I right?
Yeah.
So in some
It
of
talks
these
about
studies,
more in this article. It says sometimes it can do a large uplift, so like
See how
a
these
thrust fault, and other times it doesn't do that. It's more strike slip. So they think
Right.
when it did in 923, it did a big thrust like uplift, which is why it made a tsunami.
right.
So,
And that was on the Seattle fault. Here's
Yeah.
the Devil's Mountain.
because it lifted up and made a tsunami, but it would have wrecked everything that was there too, because it was like a big, whatever they said, 1 to 2 meters of uplift. So that wouldn't have been good. Well, if you'd been there,
Right.
if you would have been
So the
launched.
Seattle faults are down here, and I'm sharing this online. So yeah, the faults are down here in Seattle. This is the Whidbey ones, and then this is the Devil's Creek up here. I think this is a big one. No, it's the Kalawa Fault, Little River Fault. I was trying to find the Olympic Wall of Liniment kind of goes right through here. It's not gonna. It's a Tacoma one.
Yeah.
It won't show me.
Now they're more worried about the Seattle one, but the Tacoma fault can do that too, which is
Yeah. Well, most of the earthquakes you can see 6 and above since 1700. Look, they're all down here, and that's a Tacoma fault right there. And I see a lot of activity in this region when I study the vibrations or the smaller earthquakes. I see what is going on. What is it about this area? Benedict just subscribed. Thank you, Bad Nintendo. Thank you for subscribing. It's interesting that this has got all of the activity. Here's the Seattle fault up here, right? There is this one, 6.8 that happened in 1872, the Chelan, Washington, and then way up in the north, 1909. But most of the quakes happen right here, and these are the larger ones. You go this at 55 kilometers in depth. That's in the subducting plate. Puget Sound, 1939. 6.7, Browns Point, 1965, 64 kilometers. That's in the subducting plate. 2001, 6.8. The Long Branch, Washington, 51 kilometers. That's in the subducting plate.
And Puget Sound both went off in 46 before the Vancouver Island 7.3, and it also went off in 49.
49, 50 kilometers depth, 6.7.
Before
right
the
here.
Haida Gwaii 8.1.
Right. And up here, here's the 7.5. Haida Gwaii is up here. And the 7.5, 1946. And Vancouver Island, 1906, 6.5, 6.3, 1919, 6.9, 1918, 6.1, 1957, 2004, 6.4, 23 kilometers, and 22 kilometers, 6.4 in 2011. And then offshore, 6.0 in 1926. That's all that's been happening in this region since 1700.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for something to happen, it's not going to happen out here on the fault system here, so to speak. But look at the history. It seems that there's always some sort of this funky, weird connection that goes this way and then comes down. I don't understand it. Luago, thanks for subscribing. It is very odd, and for all the hoopla, somebody of Boombo, I think somebody just did something here. I turned. Thanks, yo. I think it's interesting to think. All they talk about, most everybody talk about the Puget Sound fault, right? Or not the Puget Sound fault, but the Cascade
Cascadia.
breaking.
Everybody's
and
obsessed with Cascadia, like
they're
they are
obsessed with
with
it, right? But
there's
inside,
all sorts of other faults that could go off and cause major problems. It's just nobody's paying any
correct.
attention to.
And that's why we bring attention to these faults. That's why we're talking about these things. So, other people, thank you. After hours, I don't understand what's going on. But
and they know because they've been studying all these faults, usually very recently in the last few years, trying to figure out when they last went off. But whenever they do a new study, they get better data. So right now, they may say it went off 4 times in 3,000 years, but they may do something else and find out it went off 6 times in 3,000.
Right.
So if that's the case, the recurrence rate is shorter, right? So
yeah.
It just depends on what the new data tells them. And what we only know about like what's going on there since 1700, technically.
Right, and that's kind of why I always start with the 1700 number, but Planet Van be sweet.
But according to them, it's gone off a whole bunch of different times, depending on which one.
Right. And there wasn't a lot of records here. They have a lot of stories. The Native Americans that lived here, and it's only recently that they started really listening to these guys talk, and it's really been a blessing. Again, I keep saying his name, Nick, because he's reached out to the Randy, that Native American, and listening to his stories, and him growing up as a little kid in the Seattle area and the Yakima area, all this whole region, and the way they would talk about the different spirit animals and how they would be responding back and forth, and I think it's pretty incredible when you say, okay, hey, he's talking about tsunamis, he's talking about earthquakes, he's talking about snow, ice coming down the rivers, and the ice packs. They found human material 25,000 years old in the Seattle area. And it's like, that's before or during the last freaking ice age, which ended, so to speak, around 15 million years ago. I don't know when the Missoula floods and all that stuff happened. I just don't know. But I think talking or watching some of the Graham stuff, that's really interesting, and how the floods that all happened. A lot of people are focused on the floods too, and that came across out of Montana and the like, due to the whatever. And then there's we spent a whole summer talking about the the Spokane floods versus the Missoula floods, and then we also learned about floods coming out of the Vancouver area into Washington as well. It's like, wow, man, just the geography is very, very, very rich. It's history and how all these things are created. And it seems to me that the Pacific Northwest is kind of young, so to speak. And when you get down to where I'm at, it's old, and it's already been washed and gone through the grind, and it's It's not there anymore, you know. But it is, you know. My area had 17 million years ago had a supervolcano exploded, larger than most supervolcanoes in North America, except for a couple, you know. And well, I'm interested in why, what event was happening that made that thing occur, and I think you know, we can study all these different earthquakes and the faults and the volcanoes, but put them in the greater context in the movement of North America. That you know, Oregon is being spun clockwise. Seattle's, you know, spun clockwise. There's like a spot here in Washington that doesn't move. Everything's going around it. It's kind of weird. And the GPS all shows all this stuff. I think that's kind of interesting too.
Other
And that's- Go ahead.
major faults went off around the same time as Seattle fault too. In
Yeah,
the early
Oh.
900s, New Madrid.
early
went off.
900s. Yeah, we can look at some of those. Why don't we do that? We
New
get the
Madrid
key
went
out.
off. We have to find the actual study on each one.
Oh, the GIA only goes back to 1000. So
Yeah. Yeah, so you have to find the study on each individual fault because
right.
in Madrid they found out it's gone off 4 times. Like
Yeah.
well, in 2,000 years, I think it is.
Yeah.
And when you find the study, it lists the dates. And
Well,
one of
yeah,
the times it
one of
went
them
off
was like
900.
900, and the other one was like right at the
Yeah.
you know, the
And
millennial change.
Mears Fault in Oklahoma went off around 900 AD too.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, which was a long time before fracking, and they think it was a 7.
Well,
So this is what people don't understand. Like when you start studying these things and find out it did it way before we were doing all this other stuff, you realize that the
Right.
faults don't give a rat's ass about what we're doing to them.
well, there are man-made earthquakes. You agree to that? So
Yeah, but they're within like whatever, how far the well goes down. So depending on the well, if it's close to a well and the well only goes down 3 kilometers max, well, if the quake is 10 kilometers deep, it's probably nothing to do with the well. This is what people don't understand because you have to go and look at what the depth of the quake is, and then you got to look at the depth of the wells in that area. Sometimes there's ones that are super deep, but they're very rare for wells. And then most of them are not that deep because it's not economically viable for them to go down too far.
right, because they're just drilling for oil, and they take the core samples from the oil companies.
And when they first
And then they're
started drilling for oil, they
ideas out
weren't going down hardly that far at all because
Right.
it wasn't
right,
economically viable. to do it.
economically
They
viable. Yeah.
went to whatever one they could get to once they found out it was there and sucked the
Yeah,
oil out.
I did a search for our 6 and above in North America, and you can see where the main quakes are happening. And Yellowstone's got a bunch around it. Seattle's got a bunch around it, and then California, Nevada, bunch. And Denver's got something. Mexico's over with something, and then you go over to New Madrid, and you go over there by Charles, North Carolina or South Carolina there, and then out there in Montreal, in Alberta.
And the first oil well in North America was actually in Ohio.
Right. And they don't even have it on this list. It would that'd be less than a 6. The 5s, we've seen a lot of 5s happen, and especially in Texas recently, that it used to be the record was 5.7. You'd see a 5.8 come in, and then all of a sudden they lowered it, and they kept doing that. They've done it
And
all
what's funny, when I was reading about the LA Basin, the first oil well in the LA Basin is under Dodger Stadium now, which they're digging up and putting new underground clubhouses and everything now. I just saw the other day, so maybe they'll find
to do that. Oh my God, they spend a lot. You know why Dodgers are owned by a group of people rather than a family, and
that's very funny. So now the baseball stadium's on top of the original oil well. LA Basin. Great funny.
Yeah. Jeez. my gosh.
And the first oil well in the States, I think it was like in the 1840s, is in a farmer's field, still in the farmer's field in Ohio. And the oil comes up because they found it when they were trying to dig a water well to feed the cattle that was at the farm. And all this oil started coming up with it. And you can actually go and see where it is now, and you can see that there's still oil there coming up where it is.
Right. And it's
So,
really
crazy
interesting.
Start studying all this stuff.
Yeah. Just looking at the map I have here, downtown Los Angeles, the closest earthquake, 1855 was a 6. You got Northridge, of course, in 94, 6.7. The Simi Valley one, which is the one I first felt, they got that as a 6.6. That's in 1971.
Washington quake in 1855 too.
And then 1769, Greater Los Angeles, right? They don't know where this quake was, 1769, right? The Los Angeles doesn't have anything in Los Angeles. But everybody in Los Angeles is worried about, the big earthquake.
And the North Cascades quake was the same year as Owens Valley. And the same year there was a quake too.
Yeah, and then you look in the Owens Valley, plenty of earthquakes there. A lot of earthquakes, like a little arc here in Nevada, right? Big quakes. 6.5, 54, 6.2. Big 7.1 and 54 as well. 54 is 6.9. this one here, 1959, 1915. That's when Lassen went off.
Well,
we need to really talk about that.
Technically, you have a thrust fault every place you have an oil field, because that's how the oil pocket got lifted up to get there so that we could drill into it. That's basically what they found out. And it's actually the oil companies that have a lot of the fault studies, because they're the ones that are doing it there. So that's what they find out. And they say, oh, we got a gigantic thrust fault going right through the oil field. Well, of course you do, because that's how the oil got there in the first place, how it got lifted up, so that where the uplift is, so you can actually get to it to drill to it. So it's all very exciting.
I think the next
these things.
Yeah, I think the next one we'll move over to Idaho, Montana, and we'll come back down south through Nevada and Utah, because we already touched a little bit. Yeah,
you want to do Idaho and then go down.
Yeah,
and keep doing that down.
Yeah,
like down and then up and down.
Yeah,
up until we get all the way across.
Just to get a little familiar with some of these faults and the history. Now, we can look at the history of the major faults here in Seattle, and what was it? What's the date on one of the earthquakes? Right there, just had it. 1965. How about this?
To me, all this stuff should be taught in school in like everybody's local area, and then nobody would get caught with their pants down. But this is the issue.
Yeah, I think the 1949 earthquake. I think 1949 earthquakes. There was one in Seattle.
Yeah, the 46 one I think was Valentine's Day, 46, and then the Vancouver Island one was like June, I think, and then in 49 I think it was like April, Puget Sound.
And Haida Gwaii had an 8.
August was Haida Gwaii.
Yeah, Haida Gwaii had August 22 had an 8. And what led up to the Seattle fault? Let's see, let me share this tab instead. Okay, so I don't know what date was that Seattle fault.
Seattle one was in February 2001, so you got to look
413. 413. I'm doing 1949.
Oh, you're doing 49 right now.
Yeah, then we'll go north on that one. Well,
I've already looked them all up before.
Okay, buddy. I got you. All right, so we're looking into April. So looking at April here, I can go back a year, but it's just already done 48. just the last weekend. Looking for the Adrenal Islands had a 6.8 in 49, which we've already talked about. You can see it's already green. Mutual Con Mexico had a 6.5. Off the coast of Northern Cal, 6.5. Oh, interesting there. Puget Sound right there, bang, 6.8. That's called the Olympia earthquake. So what led up to it? I get to go back to 48. Damn. I go back to 48. What led to it? Guerrero, Mexico had a 6.4. January, February. There's Greece 7.3. God bless America. April.
I already know.
The DR 6.9. There's Greece again.
Joe's doing it live, so you're going to see the same pattern.
Yeah.
Again.
There's the pattern, baby. Peru 6.6. Alaska 7.1 on the peninsula. Wow. So we have the DRs popping at a 6.9. We have Alaska popping at a 7.1. We have Greece doing 7s. Mexico 6.4. Peru 7s. Kodiak Island, which we just had a quake near Kodiak, right? 6.
2 of them.
Mhm.
2 5s. Because
Greece is banging all over the place. Peru another 6.5. Mexico, Veracruz, that's the interior side of Mexico. So that's the Gulf of Mexico side. 6.8. So the Caribbean is bouncing real hard. Alaska's bouncing real hard. South America is bouncing real hard. And the same, within a year of the Washington earthquake, right?
Yeah.
And let's see if anything's in.
Because we're tracing back a year from the date or
Right.
whatever quake we're looking at to see what it's doing.
November, we had a 7 in Costa Rica. So Central America is banging real hard. Southern California had a 6. I didn't see that. Wow, in December. All right. Doesn't say where. The Rat Islands had a 6.6. Northern California had a 6. See? Southern California, then Northern California. All in December. And then going to 49. January. Nothing there. Adrenal Islands, up way up in Alaska stuff, 6.8. Mutual Con Mexico had a 6.5, so there's more pressure coming up. Off the coast of Northern Cal is 6.5. So 2 Northern Cals, 6 and 6.5 happened.
It's nuts.
And then Puget Sound with the 6.8. All right. Then Chile came at 6.9. Chile 7.3. Chile 6.6. Mexico Mutual Can 6.5. Bolivia 6.8. Argentina 6.9, 6.9. Remember we're New Hebrews. Mariano, Guatemala 6.0. Freaking. Why is Mariano keep on 6.5 Peru, August. Ecuador 6.5. A lot of power to 6.5 Panama. Canada 8.0. Haida Gwaii 6.3. The Adrenal Island 6.8. So is there a relationship between Puget Sound and Haida Gwaii having an 8? Maybe we ought to look up Haida Gwaii's.
No, you need to look up 1946 next, because this is how I found the pattern in the first place for the Pacific Northwest. So I want you to do 46.
I'm in it. Looking at Guatemala with a 6. Gulf of Alaska 6.6. February, Adrenal Island 6.8.
Because 46 was crazy for quakes in the North.
Yeah, it was. Chiapas 6.0. Argentina 6.0. Central Cal had a 6.3. Cuba had a 6. That sounds kind of familiar. A little less power, except for Cuba has a strong one.
You just wait till you get into this.
April. Unimak Islands 8.6. What the?
Because that's the quake that made the big tsunami that hit Hawaii And that's why we have
Oh,
the Pacific
167
Economic
people killed all
Warning
these
Center
kids.
now.
Yeah.
That's why they made it, was because of that
That's why
quake.
they made it for this one. It snuck up on them. They didn't know it was coming.
Yeah.
There's Greece, 6-0. Okay.
Keep going.
I am. June. Oaxaca pops in with a 7-1. Vancouver 7-3.
Yeah, that's the Vancouver Island quake on the inside
Okay.
towards the Georgia Strait.
Yeah. 6-0 Honduras. Guatemala 6-5. Mexico, Veracruz 7-1. Again, that's on the interior. Fox Islands up there. Alaska 6-8. Still power up there, right? Chile 6-3. August. Chile 6-9. The DR pops at a 7-5.
Yeah,
And a
that
7.
that had a
Whoa.
major tsunami in the Caribbean.
Major tsunami, 1,700 people passed away.
Yeah, that's the last major tsunami in the Caribbean, 46.
And another tsunami. See it, two of them 4 days apart. Earthquake of 7 and yeah.
Keep going.
Um,
The grand finale is going to be good. When you
7-2 in August, Argentina. September, Peru, 6-1, eco region. October, King Champion. DR 7 again. That's 3 7s out of the DR.
Yep.
Bolivia 6. Unimac Island again 6-5. I understand that. Adrenal Islands 7. Argentina 6-2. Peru 6-8. In December. Oh, there's the Hunchu. Blam. In the Red Island 6-5. A lot of power. And so can you deduce or can you surmise that because
In
Alaska went off super hard?
46 was the Nankai Trough.
Right. And I'm looking up 46 right now.
Yeah.
The DR was going big. They don't have anything in the mid-Atlantic because I don't even think they're watching the mid-Atlantic. Were they then? Maybe they can probably
if
tell.
they were, the seismos were not as detailed. Like stuff close to Iceland they could pick up then. Because if you look at the Iceland records of the northern mid-Atlantic quakes, they actually go back to 1900. But they don't have too many like the first 40 years. They were only catching the big ones. Ones that were big enough that they could detect them in Iceland.
I don't know, man. Was it the bomb that created all these Nankai Trough stuff going on? I don't know, man.
Well,
they dropped 2 bombs over there.
But if you actually study 46, which I've gone crazy, there's massive solar storms in 46.
Oh, is there? All right.
Yeah.
So Puget Sound goes off in
the
49.
biggest one. The biggest storm, I think, if I remember right, was right before the 8.6 at Aleutians. And that year in the North Pacific, it went 8 in the middle of Aleutians. Then it went 7.3 Vancouver Island and Nankai Trough on the other side.
Yeah, 8.3, yeah. Yeah. And then during this whole time, that's where Puget Sound went 6-8. The Olympia. Also, the Caribbean was bouncing super hard.
Yeah.
It's
like the same pattern, just like super powered up.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you got to say, okay, everything's hitting 7s. Okay, that's bad trouble. Even Cali got into this a little bit. Did you drop out? No, you're there. I heard something about.
No, that was on my other.
Something closed. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't this one, thankfully. My old one behind me does that every once in a while because it's an old
Okay.
Windows 10 one.
Oh,
So it just
Windows 10.
it just conks out every once in a while and resets itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm well aware of that.
It's like it forgets to communicate with the 32-inch monitor that's connected to it. It says I need
Right.
a break. Then it makes that
Right.
noise.
Right.
Resets itself.
Well, I think it's pretty darn interesting, all that, to say, when did the core stop and moving backwards again? That's still up in, and I read a little bit about that. Dr. V, or what do you want to call him, Dutch's greatest nemesis that in his mind.
I don't even know where Vidal
He came out with a new article saying that
Southern California.
it spins maybe not like the outer does. It has its own different kind of spin. So they're not sure that it's stopped. It's going in a way they didn't expect. So, and it has a wobble. It's not smooth. It's not like a ball bearing in a series there. You'll have to read a V, where the freaking crap his name was. I know it's V, but I don't want to give him too much credit because boy, the guy's got an ego. But anyway, he just came out with another article here. I read it, or it was posted, right? And I read it, and he said there's some interesting things to it. They believe that it stopped, several years ago, and it's kickstarted again, but it's going in a different direction. And it's not necessarily going backwards. It's going in a way that they're not totally sure yet. That's the last I heard. So try to.
I'm guessing it's probably why the magnetic North Pole and South Pole move. What it's doing.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
When it's doing all these adjustments, right? That's why it's moving around. Like to me, they're trying to make it way too complicated. Like it's just doing what it does. It's
right.
Adjusting.
And from what I read, that it's been oscillating.
Yeah.
Meaning it does it and it does things in series. Kind of like what's going on in the sun. The sun, flipped a script. Its polarity has gone the other way now. It's solar maximum. That's part of it.
Probably every planet's doing it if they had monitoring systems on every planet to figure out what it's doing. I bet it's the same thing.
Right. It's a June 12th article and a USC study. And here's one study here. This is June 12th, 24. The core is backtracking, slowing down in relation to the planet's surface. It runs on its own deal, man. John Vidal, Dean Professor at Earth Science at USC, Dornziff.
Yeah, so I guess
College of Letters and Arts and Sciences. But we found 24 more observations signaling that the result was inescapable. The inner core had slowed down for the first time in many decades. Other scientists have recently argued for similar and different models, but our latest study provides the most convincing resolution.
Yeah. So your data is only good to the latest study. That's what you need to know.
And even though a lot of what we say here on the rabbit hole, sometimes we're talking on our backside. But sometimes we're just saying this is our current understanding. And we're not being dogmatic about anything. And we're learning as we go. And we're going to make errors. And that's what the interactive thing is all about. It's like, hey, I'm thinking this. What do you think?
Well, like even professionals make errors too. They just correct it in their next study.
Yeah. And it's hard. And it's harder for them to say things. See, we're not paid to say things. Well, obviously there's, you know, gifts, that people do. Appreciate that too, by the way. But these people get paid, and sometimes they just can't speak because it's too controversial. That's where Nick has got himself into, a sling in a lot of ways. But he's also saying, look, dude, I just don't know. I got a master's degree, but I don't have a PhD. And,
Or
like
some people try to play stuff down, but if you talk to their colleague,
right,
that is in the same thing that they are, the colleague might have a total different view. So just
hi, Bob. How are you? Nice to see you, Bob.
Yeah.
I wonder what he says. Now I can chat with y'all. All right, you on break? I'd like to thank Timmy and Snowplow King and Susan, 7 times 7. Also, Come On Mikey and Flutter Girl and Quake Cat and UT. Planet Vampy, One Eden, Just Simply Sue. Love you, sister. San Diego Dan Stan. Dan Stan. Dan. Old Danny boy. Anyway, and share.
I think that most professionals would rather have us talking about it, learning about it, and being interested in it. Actually ask the majority of them because they want everybody to be as interested and excited about the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
So a lot of people interested in it.
Joe Bob, you're right, and that's what we've often said, and not tongue in cheek, but in kind of reality. What makes JSL different is that we want to learn this stuff, and we got a lot of different venues, a lot of different areas to do that. Yeah, I kind of keep it in, wraps. I kind of try to keep it in a direction, a context, I'll call it. Like if we're talking about Washington, let's not talk about anywhere else. I kind of went off a little bit. It's not about Los Angeles, but I was trying to draw a correlation to the similar things there. But we always kind of bring up the historical record of saying, hey, look, this earthquake happened in this date. What led up to? Is there something, unless it's, out of the blue, the earth farted and there's an earthquake. But nobody believes that. They believe there's something called cone stress. There's stress that the plate's moving and it creates it. But our supposition is that you can see that stress moving with other earthquakes along the plate boundaries that are adjacent to that earthquake. And we look back only 1 to 2 years. You can probably look back more and see a larger thing. But we can see it in a short time of one year before, 1 year after, where it goes and where it's been. It's kind of like the wind. You know where it goes. You can hear it. You can feel it. But and that's kind of what our practice is. Are we forecasting? Nope. We think there might be an AI that maybe be able to do that, but we don't. We leave that to other knuckleheads. And we say, there's a place of interest. I'm looking here. It's just what we do. In the Pacific Northwest, significant historical earthquakes in the Pacific Northwest.
So that gives you all the ones from fairly recent, going back to 1700, basically, that they know about.
Right.
In the Pacific Northwest. So you can take any one of those dates of those quakes and find out what's going on a year before. To me, all it is data, right? The more data I get, I can use it to correlate with other things.
Sure.
That's what I do.
And you're making a supposition, just as I am, of saying, hey, we we don't believe quakes happen in a vacuum. We think there's although we're staying on the eastern side of the Pacific plate, we keep being drawn to the other side. I don't know if my brain can handle it.
But I'm a weirdo. I go all over the world.
You do, and I love that about you. In this rabbit hole, it's December 22, 2024. Is there anything you want to close this rabbit hole without?
No, we never did the most recent quake in that area of the Puget Sound that was big. So it was 2001, but we can do that
another time. Yeah, it's already an hour and 50 minutes into this.
Yeah.
I don't want to get you too tired, because we were on a while. And getting the, some of the things that I'm trying to do here on this side here to make it a little bit more fun going forward. And got some of it worked out. Got other stuff I'm still working on. But Christmas is Wednesday. This is Sunday. I think maybe are you good on Christmas Eve, or do you have something you're going to be doing? Or
no, it doesn't matter to me.
Because Nick's going to be on the 26th.
Yeah, so Boxing Day.
Yeah. All right, 24th, everybody, Christmas Eve. Are you good with doing it in the middle of the day before your dinner, or you want to do it after your dinner?
Oh, we probably won't be having it till our Christmas dinner till the 25th anyway.
No, I said on Christmas Eve, on the 24th. Are you good for doing midday rabbit hole? Or?
Yeah, I can do it, whatever.
All right. I'll do.
So I don't know what are we going to do next time? Idaho?
We may do wherever.
We got to figure out what we're going to do for the next one. I just need to know where to focus my efforts. Because I've studied like every state already. It's just a matter of me getting to know.
Yeah. And I've spent a lot of time doing it too. I appreciate you. There's no end to this, everybody. So the world is big, and I've
already looked at the Idaho list of quake things already. So
yeah. No, it'll be relatively easy. I want to talk about some of the topography, some of the faults. There's new earthquakes that are happening on the western side of Idaho, and it's not the Sawtooth Mountains. And the Sawtooth Mountains, I want to talk a little bit about those and probably a little bit of the geography of it all, and then we'll do the faults, and then we'll do the greatest earthquakes in the area, and then we'll go from there. So Idaho's next.
It'll be just like when we talk about Nevada quakes, because you'll see, oh look, that's the same year that this happened and that happened, because I already looked at it, so it's fun.
It's great. I love it. Well, appreciate you, brother, and I don't want to stay Saturday. Maybe I'll work tomorrow. I don't know. Have fun. Love you, and remember, don't get none on you. And we'll see each other Tuesday night. And Tuesday night. The Euro News, February 10th of 23 said the Earth core has changed its rotation, and so interesting, right? Yeah. So in 23 is when that news came out. Hey, it stopped. What? Right. and I'll give you the other article, Bureau News. Just so, I think this is the one that blocked everybody. Bang, bang. There you go. All right. Good night, everybody. Have a good one. Remember,
Good night.
don't get none on you.
I'm losing my voice.
All right. Good night, buddy.
Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.